All right, I'll do my dramatic intro. No, wait, hold on. I did it too fast. I wasn't ready. Hi. Welcome to Oh, That's Good. A conversation in which I talk to interesting people about things that they are an expert on that make them happy. Today, I'm going to be talking to Sam Kusnetz. He is my teammate. He is my friend. He is a sound designer. He is a projections designer. He is a stage manager. He knows a lot about lights. He's sort of an all-around theatrical guru. He's also an excellent teacher. And I thought, what a wonderful person to talk to. And what are we going to talk about, Sam?
Today we're going to talk about psychoacoustics, which is a broad field, but it has a great name that makes it sound even broader, which is why I like it. But psychoacoustics, broadly speaking, is about acoustics is the study of how things sound, how sound works, and psychoacoustics is about how we perceive sound and how we think things sound.
I'm with you.
And it's a delightful subject matter for me. Professionally speaking, it's delightful because I think that when you're a very novice sound designer, you think about your role in the theater as being to be in charge of what sounds people hear. And then I think that as you get more mature as a sound designer, you start to realize that in fact your job is what sounds people think they hear. And the most succinct example of the difference that I can give is this is a sort of a truism in film and television. If you've got a scene where a bunch of people are around a campfire, and you need the sound of the campfire in the scene,
Or the sound of the train.
or the sound of Metro North blowing by.
Yeah.
If you need the sound of a campfire, the good sound designer, the starting out, says, no problem, I'll just go out to the woods, build myself a campfire, put a mic on it, record that for 20 minutes, and I'm all set.
Right.
And then, but the very good sound designer says, I will take the cellophane off of a pack of cigarettes, and I'll do this with it in front of the microphone.
Crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. Okay.
And then I'll use that sound, because the truth is that the actual sound of this campfire sounds less to us like a campfire than the crinkling cellophane.
So this is like the audio equivalent of people who prep food for food photography, and you see those like comparison shots where you said, this is the real food that you would eat. This is the food that you see in the photo, and if you ate it, you'd die because there's glue on it, and there's this on it, and there's like some kind of like, fuel that I ladled on, but it looks beautiful, and it looks like what the thing that you think of as food.
Right, but we're talking about psychoacoustics.
Okay,
right?
okay.
Which is the same thing.
You didn't
but
claim to be an expert in...
I am not an expert in food photography or food styling. Okay, so psychoacoustics, the crinkling cellophane. Mm-hmm. But that's not even, for me, the most interesting part. Okay, the most interesting part boils down to sound being about directing attention. But you can blow it farther and say really that design is about directing attention, right? So the role of the actor is to deliver the story through the text and through the use of their body to insinuate things that are insinuated in the text. Mm-hmm. Speaking very coarsely. Mm-hmm. But the role of the designer, good design, is just pointing. And when you point really well at something, the audience will look where you're pointing, either literally or metaphorically. If you point poorly, they'll look at your hand. And so mediocre sound design is, gosh, that was a really good cue. But great sound design is, oh my goodness, it's so sad, the scene, or whatever.
Something.
Right, I feel, or like I noticed, or like the audience walks out and you could imagine grilling them and saying, hey, so in scene 7, what was scene 7 about for you? And they will describe, they walked into the room and they had this conversation and this happened and that happened, and they will describe the events. But then if they continue to describe things that were only implied by the scene, and you feel as though that is sort of part of their whole understanding, then my feeling is that's when you know you've done a good job, because the things that are implied become explicit in their memory of it. So,
Yeah.
if good
yeah.
design is pointing, psychoacoustics is about pointing using the cues that the audience is not explicitly aware of in their hearing.
So being extra sneaky.
Extra sneaky. Second layer of sneak.
Okay.
So, one of the clearest and most straightforward examples of psychoacoustics in action as we use it in live entertainment is called the precedence effect, which is also sometimes called the Haas effect, named after a person whose last name was Haas. And I don't know very much about him, so I don't call it the Haas effect. I call it the precedence effect, because they both mean the same thing. And this way, I don't need to know if I'm talking about a person who has other stories to tell. So, the vibe with the precedence effect, the basic action of the precedence effect is this. If you hear one sound coming from two sources, for example, two different speakers, but it's the same sound coming out of the two loudspeakers. Mm-hmm. If you hear one sound from two places, all other things being equal, if they are more or less the same volume, if they are not too terribly far apart from your perspective, and if there are not other extenuating circumstances, if the two sources of sound arrive at your ears at the same time, okay, fine. But if one arrives slightly early, your brain will attribute all of the sound that you hear to that first source.
And when you say attribute,
so this is how the senses in the brain are mushed together to try to deliver you, your consciousness, one experience. Your ears, though there be but two of them, do all kinds of tricky stuff to attempt to place in 3D space around you the source of every sound that you hear. So the precedence effect describes how your brain says, all right, my eyes are telling me this, my ears are telling me that, how do I make them work together? And if I hear the same sound coming from two places, my ears will say, that's the same sound. It's really close in time. It's probably just one sound. Probably something weird is happening with reflections or with something else. So I'm going to just say that whichever one I heard first, your mental image of where it is in space is going to be wherever the first sound came from.
okay, so spatially located.
Yeah.
The thing that got to me first, my mental attention is going zoop. That's where the sound is coming from.
There's a great term.
And the extra sound that still got to me, but got to me a little bit later. How much later? How late are we talking about?
Well, it varies, right? But the overall window is no longer than about 40 milliseconds.
So to trick for this brain trick to work, it's like got to slip in under the wire and we don't. I'm not going to notice it. I'm just going to feel like that's what
it was all over there.
It was over there.
Yeah.
Okay.
This
isn't actually located. It's not actually located. I mean, it's located at that source. Like that sound is located at that source. The speaker is sending sound to me from wherever it is.
Sure.
But it's also coming to me from a totally different, not a totally different, but maybe a somewhat different direction.
Right.
And I'm kind of ignoring that one.
Right. Now this happens also. This happens all the time when you're in a big echoey room, right? And someone is talking to you and they're not right next to you. You're hearing many copies of the sound that comes out of their face. First, in time, you hear the sound that comes right out of their mouth and comes straight to you. Right? But then after that, you hear the sound that came out of their mouth, went off at an angle, bounced off the wall, and bounced into your ear.
Right.
And because there are many angles available, and the sound radiates out of a person's face in roughly a cone forward of their head, but it's not that simple. But let's say it's that simple. All the sound that comes out of their face comes out, some goes into your ears, some goes past and bounces off of different surfaces directly into your ears. Some bounces off of a surface, then bounces onto a second surface, then into your ears, and so forth. So there's a complex ping pong ball bouncing all over crazy like behavior of each sound as it comes out of their face.
Which is a thing our brain is used to having to deal. Like we have a like almost like a subset of processing in there. It sounds like that is if it weren't engaged, we'd be hearing this cacophony and making less sense of it. So there's this thing that's like a pre-pass filter or something like, okay, there's going to be a little extra sound that comes in late. Shoot, just make it feel like you don't really hear that.
It belongs to the earlier sound.
Okay.
Yeah. And this all sort of falls under a category, a concept in cognitive science called the perceptual spotlight.
Ooh.
Which is a phrase I love. And basically the idea is this. Our senses have a constant stream of incoming data, with the notable exception of the eyes, which have lids that can be closed. All of the other senses have no sort of, no firm way to attenuate them. And so the brain has just a completely unending incoming stream of data from all the senses.
How overwhelming.
Profoundly. and the attentional spotlight is the concept that describes the brain's ability to elect to draw your attention, your consciousness, to a subset of that overwhelming torrent of incoming.
It's your brain saying, "Look where I'm pointing."
Yes.
Look where I'm pointing.
Look where I'm pointing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So if I want to direct the audience's attention using the precedence effect, then I have a limited range of difference of loudness between multiple sources, within which I can use only time to pivot their eyeballs. Right? So if the audience hears an actor standing center stage, if they hear the voice of the actor coming right out of their face, coming straight at them, and they also hear that same voice of the actor coming out of speakers, which are not super close to the actor, if I delay the sound out of those speakers by enough time that the sound comes from the actor's face to the audience's ear just a few milliseconds before the sound comes from the speaker, and the speaker is not too much louder than the actor, it will start to seem it will start to seem to the audience as though the actor is not amplified. Now, there's a lot of variation here.
Sure.
Expectation has a lot to do with it. The other cues that the audience member is receiving in terms of behavioral cues, visual cues, those all play into it.
But what a trick, though.
But that's the idea. And when you are doing a show that is mic'd, that you are attempting a natural sound, and many people have many opinions about what is best, what is good, what is aesthetically preferable. I'm not talking about that right now. I'm saying let us agree for the purposes of this conversation that a natural sound means that an educated listener cannot tell that there are microphones in action. Just for the purposes of this discussion, let's say that.
Yeah.
If that is the goal, then you have to be constrained with your use of loudness, and you have to be exact with your use of precedence. And ultimately, the truth is, you can have more slop in the loudness department than the precedence department if you want it to sound really great.
Okay. So the final experience of this potentially is that as a designer, as an audience member, I have come into the room, I've sat down, I've listened to a singer or an actor, and the thing that I believe and feel is that I heard them real well and they weren't on a mic.
Right.
What a trick. Yeah.
And there's some knock-on effects here, right? Like, if you're in a theater and you're sitting relatively close to the stage, the total number of degrees of your vision through which an actor might travel if they walk all the way from one side of the stage to all the way to the other is rather great, right? So if the actor is standing all the way to your left, and you look all the way to your left, and the speaker through which that actor's voice comes is all the way to your right.
Oh, yeah.
It does not matter how much delay. It doesn't matter how much level. It's not going to happen. The directionality is too great. If you're looking effectively 90 degrees difference between the actor and the speaker, it's not going to happen. There is a range in which it works, and there's no point in specifying that range because it varies depending upon a gazillion little variables. But so that's one of the things you need to worry about. But the inverse is also valuable. It means that you can help direct the audience's attention to wherever the actor is standing by using only precedence, as long as you have speakers in enough places. Oh. So if the speaker all the way over to your left covers the whole space of the audience, and the speaker over to your right covers the whole space of the audience, and therefore the whole audience can hear both speakers, you can make it so that when the actor's all the way there, there's a little more delay in this speaker and a little less delay in that speaker. When you are in your car or listening to headphones and you turn the pan knob left and right, you hear the sound go from left to right when you turn the knob. That is a difference in volume. A pan knob just turns the volume down on one side and up on the other. But in live sound reinforcement, what you want to do is not pan with very much level. You want to pan mostly with delay.
That's wild.
Yeah. Now, but if you go to a concert, let me give it a better example. If you go to the inauguration in Washington, D.C., the mall is this extremely long rectangle, right? And they want to put many thousands of people on the mall and let them all experience the inauguration. But the person who's speaking is all the way down on one end. And the person who's listening might be all the way down at the other end. So if the president-elect is standing on the Capitol and speaking to the audience, we say, all right, well, let's put a microphone in front of the president and let's put some big speakers up so that the president's voice is amplified. Well, if the speakers are so big that they're loud enough to be heard in the back, then the people in the front will be melted by them. So we can't have that.
No.
What we will do, in fact, is put a pair of speakers on either side.
You just hand everybody the right gauge of earplug.
Right.
And you're near the front, so you have the really good earplugs, and you're at the very end, so you don't have to wear earplugs at all.
What you do is you put a series of speakers down the mall.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And each set of speakers is progressively more and more delayed.
Okay. So the sound wave comes out of the first speakers, and you're going to calculate how fast it moves through air until it hits the second speakers, put that amount of time, so that when that first sound wave gets to the second set of speakers, it just gets a little boost from the new set of speakers that hopefully lines up beautifully and perfectly, and then that just keeps happening. It just keeps going.
Yep. Now, with this, you lose the precedence window, right? So the audience that's standing back by the reflecting pool, they're not going to attribute the sound somehow magically to the face of the person who they can barely see in the great distance. But their brains will attribute the sound that they hear from the nearest pair of speakers probably to the next nearest.
Oh.
Right?
So you want to add does that mean, okay, I'm making a guess now. I don't know if this is the right answer, but are you going to tweak the timing just enough do you want them to make it feel like it's coming from the nearest speakers, or do you want those to line up as closely as possible?
You want them to line up. You want them to line up exactly. So so this is like the coming around the other end of the precedence effect.
Okay.
Right? The precedence effect is the opposite of the precedence effect is if I hear the same sound badly out of time, then my attention is diffused, and I don't know exactly where to look, and also it spoils intelligibility for the spoken word. So instead of thinking about delaying one source of sound deliberately to point my attention in a direction, now we're talking about deliberately delaying sound in order to make it exactly line up with another source. So that if I am standing in line and my ears can hear the sound coming out of 6 or 7 pairs of speakers going down the Washington Mall, the sound waves that come out of each of those speakers arrives at my ears at essentially the exact same time. So that there is not a precedence blurring.
So we don't have this. So we're working against that.
Right.
In that case. Man. And this is all, I mean, this is the delay at the speed of sound. So, I mean, it's little bits of delay.
Yeah.
Although in a large space like that, I actually don't know how much delay you're going to need. Maybe it's rather a lot in a large space because,
yeah,
I mean,
well,
bigger than in a theater, certainly.
Sure. Although the delay, the delay that, basically it's 0.8 of a foot of travel in space equals 1 millisecond of delay. I'm sorry, 1 foot of space equals 0.8 of a millisecond.
1 foot of space, 0.8 of a millisecond. Okay. So
Right.
that'd add up.
Right. So it's 343. Sound travels 343 meters per second in air. I don't just have that on top of my brain. I had to look it up. 343 meters per second at room temperature, at surface altitude.
Does this mean that someone doing the Washington Mall needs to take into account the temperature of that day?
Oh,
to get it
outdoor
right?
venues absolutely need to deal with temperature. Big time.
Wow.
Big time. It's really and humidity, because the humidity of the air profoundly affects its density.
So
And
they
the
have their little
density-
weather station, and they're like, okay, we're about to start. Weather, I calculate, all right, delay here needs to be this.
Yeah.
Wow.
One of the reasons it's nice to use a Meyer Galaxy is that you can plug in a hydrometer. Hydrometer? Yeah.
What is a Meyer Galaxy?
A Meyer Galaxy. Oh, sorry. Yes, it's true. A Meyer Galaxy is a gadget meant for processing sound going to loudspeakers.
Okay.
And so, if you were on the Washington Mall and you had a whole bunch of speakers that you needed to all receive the same signal but do different things to it to make them all sound good, you'd plug the input into the Galaxy and then the output from the Galaxy to all the amplifiers that drive the speakers. And you can also plug in a thermometer and a hydrometer. I think that's the word.
I did not know that. I love that.
And so
I have a thermometer as an input to my audio device.
Oh yeah, it's super important.
I love. So this could be adjusting throughout a show. I mean, this could be like, if it's a long event, a long performance, this could be changing the delay. That's if there's a sudden downpour in the middle of it, and the second act is delayed, and then everyone comes out from the shelter and has the second act, and it got more humid. Like the delay has changed.
So there's this cool story about the Red Rocks venue out west, which was doing a sound check for some major concert, and they had been speaking with local law enforcement, and they've been really careful about making sure that the loudness of the sound system at the property line was within limits. And then they were actually just going a little bit above and beyond and sort of taking a drive down the road a ways to make sure that even outside of property line, the sound was sort of anecdotally not too loud, right? Because there's a law that says at the property line it must be a specific loudness, and then they went a little bit above and beyond, and so they were really careful. They did this big elaborate sound check. They checked everything out. Everything sounded great. Show comes along. Showtime. Curtain is at sunset. That's thing one.
Okay.
Thing two, I think it was several tens of thousands of people in attendance.
Okay.
And they got a call, a noise complaint, from a farm that was several miles away. What did you do? You just turned on this big, huge sound system. It's driving us crazy over here. All the chickens are losing their minds or whatever. Turns out that what happened was that when sunset came, the ambient temperature of the air dropped pretty profoundly. But when the several tens of thousands of humans all packed into the small space in front of the stage, they generated quite a lot of heat. And so they essentially produced, through heat, an acoustic lens that refracted the sound over to the farm in the distance.
No.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow. An acoustic lens made out of people gathered together.
It's a mess.
What a wonderful thing. I didn't know there was such a thing as an acoustic lens.
Oh, sure.
Crafted in the air through temperature generated by the happiness of people.
I think it's just generated by the bodies of people. I think that they're the same temperature, happy or not.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be poetic, Sam.
Listen, that's fine. That's your gig.
That's my thing. So going back for a second, I had this sense memory when you were talking about going back to this thing in our brains that's wired up to do this automatic processing, this thing you're using to trick me when you use the precedence effect to direct my attention, and it has all these other. And you were talking about being in a room, and just in the normal course of events, if I'm standing next to you in a room, I'm hearing you, but eventually there is something reflecting off of walls, and my brain is doing a good job of making me kind of not pay attention to that or perceive it as belonging to your voice.
Right.
And this gave me this vivid memory of being a kid. I had a buddy and I who like we liked making like silly videos together. Like he got a VHS camcorder for Christmas one year, and we just we did all these like kids making goofy videos thing. And I remember thinking like we record, and when you're a kid, of course, you're like, especially when you have video equipment for the first time, you just record anything because it's just like endlessly fascinating. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter how boring it is. You just want to record it. My kids do this too. They'll record something. They'll record just like, the corner of their forehead looking down at the phone and then play it back because it's just deeply interesting to them. And I remember doing that in an environment which was, it was like a dinner party or something. And I remember noticing that when I was in the room, I understood each I could direct attention to different conversations, right? I could be standing in a spot. I could start paying attention to a conversation which was next to me. I could shift my attention to a different conversation, and I could tune what I was like the words that I was perceiving were belonging to specific conversations, and the rest was a mush.
You can direct your attentional spotlight.
And when I went back to the recording, I couldn't understand a thing. I could not change my attention I couldn't pick out individual conversations. It was just complete noise. It was just constant noise. It was a mess. I didn't know, and I sort of didn't, I had some guesses about maybe what was going on there, but it feels like this could have been a big part of it. Is I lost the spatial information. All of that sound had been recorded at one microphone, was coming out of the TV from one location, and my brain didn't have that information anymore, and it couldn't change where my attention, it couldn't change the filters. Like my brain couldn't do any of the filtering.
Yep.
So this maybe was a big part of that.
And it's not just precedence that gets lost in that situation. That is a great example of psychoacoustics in action. It is not just the timing that and the relative level that gets lost. There's another thing going on in your brain when you listen to sound that is that employs my very favorite term in all of science. It is a mathematical concept that exists in the brain called the HRTF, which stands for head-related transfer function.
Okay.
There's a transfer function in your brain. What's it related to? The head. Okay, I guess we'll call it the head-related transfer function.
Okay.
The head-related transfer function is what we call the brain's own highly developed, alarmingly exact and precise ability to counter-calculate the frequency and time effects of sound passing through your head.
No.
But yes.
Oh, no.
So if
that's not what I was expecting at all.
If someone is here talking, the sound waves come out of their face. It goes into my left ear. But the sound waves also propagate through my head, because all objects transmit sound to one degree or another. Then the sound wave that passes through my head agitates this other eardrum, and so my other ear hears the same sound. Are you with me so far?
I am.
Now wait. The sound that this ear hears is not the same as the sound that this ear hears.
No.
To start with, it is delayed by exactly this much distance. My brain knows that distance.
Of course it does.
Second, the sound has been altered because it's passed through a solid object that is not homogeneous. Generally speaking,
mine's empty, but
yeah. Generally speaking, so sound is made up of many frequencies usually, and the higher frequencies get absorbed faster when the sound passes through dense objects.
And high frequencies are like a low frequency is like a bass rumble.
Right.
Yeah. So the
that's
high
why
frequencies, the things that aren't that, sort of disappear. When
So if you're in your house and a bus goes by, you hear a low rumble mostly. But if you go out and stand out in front of your house and the same bus goes by, you hear that same low rumble, but you also hear the hiss of the air brakes. You hear a higher pitched quality of sound coming out of the exhaust. You hear a wider variety of frequencies because those higher frequencies are absorbed by the walls and the windows of your house when you're inside it.
When I'm at a party or a dance club or something and I'm inside dancing, I get a wash of music. I step outside to cool off because I need a break and need some air, and I just hear boom, 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 boom,
right,
like
right.
that
because the higher frequencies are absorbed by the objects in between you and the source.
Okay. So that is happening in my head.
In your head.
Not like metaphorically in my head. It's actually happening in my head.
Exactly. And of course, the density of your head varies greatly, right? Like the skull is very dense, the brain is somewhat dense, the fluid between the skull and the brain is not very dense, and so forth. So there's a really sophisticated adjustment to the frequency content of any sound that passes through your head and is received by the other ear. And your brain knows this exactly. As a result, when I hear a sound that comes in this ear and passes through my head and comes in that ear, my brain is able to, with extreme precision, calculate the most likely direction that the sound is coming from by analyzing the difference between what's heard in the two ears.
That's wild.
And because you've noticed, I hope, that your ears are more or less symmetrical with each other, but not at all symmetrical front to back, right? Your ears are attached at the front part and flap free in the back part. So they're kind of like little dishes pointed forward like this. That shape of the outer ear, which is called the pinna, the shape of the outer ear and the angle at which it protrudes enables the ear, even though it is a single point, to make educated guesses about where sounds are front to back. Right? Because if there's a sound coming from back here, it comes through my pinna as well as wrapping around it. If the sound is here, it comes in directly into the ear canal, but also bounces around in the pinna and then is funneled in.
I did a science fair project on this in 3rd grade, which I'm happy to tell you about.
Oh, super.
It was the best science fair project of my life.
So using that and using the head-related transfer function, your brain does a remarkably good job of negotiating the location, the origin of a sound in this plane.
Yeah.
It turns
Yeah,
out in
okay.
this plane, your ear is profoundly less exact.
Well, because our ears are separated in this plane, right? So like we don't have
Yeah.
changing data. Like if we were doing this, if,
Yep.
if I had an ear here and an ear here, I'd be in good shape for this direction.
Right.
But presumably, this is wildly speculative. I don't know if this is scientific. I don't know but presumably, as a creature that is not airborne and is in one plane most of the time, like it's pretty useful for me to be able to locate this way, and maybe less useful to me to locate in this direction. But
Yeah.
That's a guess.
No. Yeah. The evolutionary advantage to fine resolution, horizontal spatial orientation is great, but the evolutionary advantage to having fine vertical assessment of sounds is slim for us bipeds, and so there was never any evolutionary pressure to encourage its development. But you can see in all kinds of different animals, all kinds of different evolutions. Most simply, deer can move their ears independently, right?
Oh, yeah, right.
So they're
Right.
listening and they're changing. Their
Brain
like,
filters are doing different things.
their brain filter has an understanding of all ear positions. And so
Yeah,
they
yeah.
have a continuous gradient of understanding as the ear moves. The deer's head-related transfer function has another variable feeding into it, which is which way is my ear pointing?
So this head-related transfer function, you phrased it as my brain knows this distance. My brain knows, in some sense, the mass composition in my head. Could I also phrase it? It sounds like I could also phrase it as, because it seems like it. Do you happen to know if this is a thing that kind of gets learned as
Oh, 100% learned. You do not. You are born with an empty head-related transfer function that gets filled in.
There's this metaphorically could go in so many different directions, but so another way of phrasing my brain knows this distance is my brain has learned that somehow when I knew the location of something, the signals I was receiving in both ears and through my head, whatever little electronical impulses are getting triggered because of that sound, which I know where it is, I've registered as like, that's where that is. I have learned something about when I hear things in this manner, and over time, a whole lot of that happening means that I, quote, my brain, it has some kind of model in there which has included the information of the distance between my head. Not that there's not a few neurons in there that's like, it's this many centimeters. Let's do the math. And
It's a derived formula over time that is learned over time.
And so my perceived experience of listening is this, it's just sort of this riding the crest of this wave of information where there's, like if I isolated out pieces of it, it would be, this is not what I'm experiencing at all. If I could somehow just cut out the pieces and just hear what passed through my head, like I'm not hearing that when I think about what I'm hearing or when I feel something that I'm hearing. I'm just hearing a thing and I have the feeling about it being located over there. And this is all a big executive summary or a lie.
All reality is mediated reality.
Yeah.
Is the truth. And there's an easy way to prove it for those skeptics out there, but it only works if you're not wearing shoes. Take off your shoes.
Should I do this?
Well, I think it works as a mental exercise, but you can do it if you like. Take off your shoes, and with one index finger, touch your toe while simultaneously touching your nose with the other.
I gotta try this. Hold on. I'm gonna do it. This is an interactive experience. Okay. Wait. With one, does it matter?
It doesn't matter which is which.
Finger, but then use the other one on my nose.
And you want to go 1, 2, 3, touch, both at the exact same time.
Okay. Wait. So what? Okay. I'm also focusing on balancing. So tell me what I'm looking for here.
Well, whether you detect your finger, whether your toe and your nose feel themselves being touched at the same time. My expectation is that they will feel that they have been touched. You will feel a pressure on your toe and pressure on your nose simultaneously.
Yeah.
But the neurons that transmit the feeling of touch from your toe to your brain are much farther away than the neurons that transmit the feeling of touch from your nose to your brain.
Lies.
Right?
Yeah, right.
Much farther away, relatively speaking. So there's no way at all that those two signals arrive at your brain simultaneously.
Yeah.
And yet you perceive it as simultaneous.
Oh, my goodness. Mm-hmm. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Brains are wild.
To pop the stack a little ways.
All right.
When you filmed the dinner party, the single microphone on the camera received without bias every sound, either direct or reflected, and without any analysis, right? Even if you had a stereo microphone on the camera, unless the distance of the stereo microphone was about the width of your head, and the two microphones, the two sides of the stereo microphone, were divided by something with the approximate density of the human head, there's no way for those two microphones to capture the sound in a way that's analogous to the way that your ears capture it. Someone thought about that for a while and invented binaural recording, in which a person takes a pair of microphones that are very small, puts them sitting in their ears as though they were headphones, and then records some stuff. And then you, the listener, listens to that recording with headphones, so that each microphone, which received sound in a way that simulated being an ear in a head, is played back in your ear, in your head. Those microphones receive audio that encodes the same thing, or very, very close to what your ears encode when you're listening live. And that is why a binaural recording has that uncanny reality quality.
So binaural recording takes advantage of the fact that you can record audio in a way that is effectively the same as being there, in a way that you can't with images, because you just can't, you can't have the same.
Although you can come close, right? I've seen they have these 360 cameras now, where the camera sits on a tripod and records in all directions. And then after the fact, the person viewing has a little joystick and they can turn and look whichever way they want. That's like a step towards
that idea.
Towards that same idea. Just as binaural recording is a step towards that same idea acoustically. If we encode all the spatial information as ears do, with simulated pinna and a simulated head,
and then play it back
inside real pinna, inside a real head, then you have a much more accurate simulation. Now, of course, if I'm sitting here listening and I turn my head, the spatial orientation turns with me.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Which I wouldn't get unless the person who was recording
turned their head. Right.
The recorder at that moment. Yeah. Right.
Right. So it's an imperfect simulation, but it is profoundly better than simply making a stereo recording.
Cool.
So that is why that is sort of a broader summary of your discovery.
My childhood experience.
Right. You were unable to cast your attentional spotlight using the recording because the recording did not have the information that your brain uses to cast the attentional spotlight.
Right. Man, brains, so cool.
My very favorite class in college was sensation and perception, which was sort of like a one above intro level cognitive science class, which was basically just a survey of the senses and why they're all so cool. And this is sort of this. I took this class because it was interesting, And about a week in, I realized that this class was more relevant to my interest in being a theater designer than several of my theater classes.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is so cool, Sam. Is there anything else you want to say? I mean, I feel like we've been talking for a while, and I'm like, I just want to keep talking, but also I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. So
Yeah. I mean, I do want to say that, like, for the purposes of this conversation, I avoided the most technical details, right?
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
the idea here is that all these things are true, and also other things are also true.
There's more.
There's
also
more
to know about
Yeah.
all of this. Well, that's. I have never found that to not be the case.
Yeah.
There's more. There's
Yeah.
more. Can we
Whatever
go a
it
little
is that
deeper?
you've,
Yes.
whatever it is
Yes,
you've dug
always yes.
into, you
Yeah.
have probably only scratched the surface.
Yeah. I enjoyed talking about this with you, Sam. I feel like I'm going to want to talk to you again about something, so be thinking.
I look
Thinking
forward
about
to it.
something. I know your head is full of really cool things to talk about, so we'll do it again.
I hope that this turns out to be editable.
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Either that, or I'm just gonna do this for myself and make only the most patient people sit through.
Right.
But this is great. Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.